OK, bonjour tout le monde. Je suis Pamela Isfeld, the President de La Passe, and I'm very happy to welcome you all here to our first Tradecraft webinar for our Tradecraft week on what I wish I had known on my first posting. And I apologize, you can hear my poor dog probably coughing behind me. Hopefully he will settle down in a minute or so, but that's what that strange noise is. Um, I'm very happy to be chairing this session from the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and to acknowledge and respect them as the past, present, and future guardians and caretakers of these lands. And I know people are calling in, joining us from different places in Canada and parts of the world, and so I encourage you to think about um, who was the first occupants of the land that you're joining us from, and what that means for the lives that we all live today. The recording, you will have heard the announcement. This session will be recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. So we don't index the recordings, but you should be aware that the link can be shared. So just be aware that that someone else could theoretically watch the recording. We have some limited editing capacity. So if anything really comes up that that you wish was not there, let us know, and we may be able to work a little magic. But I encourage participants to use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen for questions, and we'll pause for questions sort of after each round. Then at the end, if looks like we're about 23 participants, which is not a giant number. So at the end, I can invite, if you want to put up your hand, I can invite people to join us as a panelist so that they can be seen and give their question live, but be aware that you will be recorded. And at the end, we will stop the recording just to have a moment in case there's anything anyone wants to say or add that that don't want captured for posterity. So, vous pouvez poser des questions et faire des commentaires dans la langue de vos choix. Please go ahead and use whichever language you would like when you're making your interventions. And without further ado, I will turn to our panelists and ask them to introduce themselves, starting with Jennifer. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm in Zimbabwe, Harare, Zimbabwe, where I'm currently posted right now. And a little background on myself. I joined the department in 2011 in the Foreign Service in the MCO stream. And since then, in 2014, 14 to 17, I was in Rabat, Morocco, and then 17 to 21 in Tokyo, Japan, and now 21 to today, I am in Harare, Zimbabwe. Always as an MCO, but lots of different experiences along the way. If I continue to, should I give my few tips now?
You're welcome to, if
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't speaking out of turn. So over 10 years abroad, and I expect to stay abroad for more time. I think there's a lot of things I could say. There are many, many things, but I have 4 top items, I guess. Number 1, ask questions. Always ask questions of staff, contacts, colleagues, even your supervisor. More often, this curiosity will be seen as, that you're engaged, that you're interested, and you want to learn quickly. So please don't hesitate to ask lots of questions, and you'll more quickly grasp your files as well. Number 2, treat everyone with respect and kindness. Some people may think this goes without saying, but I would say that I have seen various examples of LES being mistreated by CBS at mission and needing some intervention there. And so no matter who it is, whether it is the driver, whether it is an OR staff, or even an ambassador, because their family and themselves, they're also in a new situation. They're sometimes quite separate from the rest of the mission community. We need to have some compassion sometimes there as well. So being kind to everyone and respect everyone, I think is super important. Culture is super exciting, but eventually yourself or your family will get tired of it and tired of adapting, tired of always renewing themselves and who they are. So I think just being patient with that and knowing that at times there will be less tolerance, there will be a need for the familiar, whether it is food, your favorite blanket, whatever that might be. And number four, understanding yourself and your boundaries that you need. I think we are in this work because we all want to do amazing things. We want to be our best, and we're willing to work overtime. We're willing to put a lot of things aside to be really good at our work. And this can be extremely tempting. We get a lot of payback from being good at our work, but at the same time, we are giving up something of ourselves. So you need to really be careful of that, whether it is planning regular exercise or making sure that your family's needs are also met because they're having a completely different experience than you are when you're on post, a totally different life than you are leading. When you're at the embassy working, they have to figure out their life, which is quite different than the one that you will be leading when you're at post. So those are my top 4 tips so far. Um, and I welcome questions later on. I think I pass now the baton to Peter Cahill or Pamela, if she's not muted, but she is.
Sorry, Peter, go ahead. That's fine with
Okay,
me. It would have
sure.
been Mike on my screen, but he's got
Either.
patience. I
Okay.
could tell.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'll assume if people are signing in for tips about a first posting, that most of the audience is in Ottawa. I'm actually calling in from Calgary today. So, as the previous speaker was saying, my name is Peter Cahill, and I've been in FS for just a bit over 20 years. Started in the FPDS stream. I'm currently in a trade position in our regional office to Alberta and the Northwest Territories. I was posted in Afghanistan, the United Arab Emirates, and Austria, doing political kind of working for the military, but not as part of the military. And then in a multilateral job, spent a bit of time in Nigeria in the way, and I'm off to Kiev in Ukraine in the fall. So a bit of all sorts of different things. I guess my key advice for people is that there's an awful lot to do once you get told you're going on a posting. And I'm talking pre-posting confirmation form, although there's a lot to do after you get that. And maybe everybody on the call is a lot more organized than me. I know there's a lot of type A, really hardworking people, so that's quite possible. But on the chance that some of you are maybe a little less organized like me, my biggest takeaway is find out the things that you need to do before posting and try to do some of them before you've even applied. So if you were looking at medical, like go to the dentist regularly, go to a travel clinic and say, I'm thinking of traveling to, and pick the country that you want to be posted to. What vaccinations would I need? Get a medical regularly. Do all those things. Like, for example, ahead of my last posting, my doctor went on leave and didn't have a doctor to do a medical anymore, but I'd actually turned down having a medical about 6 months before because I thought I'll get one for my next posting, right? So that turned out to backfire. The same thing I would say with training. Some training only opens up once you've been nominated, and some training you can do anytime. So if there's courses like getting your Section 34 certification for financial, that's a good thing to get out of the way, because otherwise you'll probably find yourself missing some of the useful training just because a lot of things will be offered at the same time, right? And you might have a family, you'll have your regular job, you might be trying to learn a foreign language. There'll be a lot of things going on, and if you find that there's useful training that's available to you ahead of even applying for posting, do it. And then the last area, I guess I would say, is finances. There's a surprising number of things you can't do with a bank once you're abroad. So if you're trying to set up, I don't know, a savings plan with mutual funds, the company that sells you the mutual funds in Canada is probably licensed to sell them either in Canada or only in certain provinces in Canada. And if they find out you're not in Canada, it's against the law for them to sell you those mutual funds. And so if you're setting up like RESPs or RSPs or TFSAs or any of these things, get that all done, have a will, get all these sorts of things, get your life under control for the things that are going to make more sense for you to do, are going to be easier for you to do while you're in Canada. And then you'll be able to focus on the many other things that you'll have to do once you get nominated and ultimately confirmed for posting. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Peter. That's great. Michael, how about you?
Hello, everyone. I'll give my little opening bit en français, just to bilingualize. Je m'appelle Michael Creighton. Je suis agent principal de développement dans la filière assistance internationale au siège du programme du Sénégal. Je suis aussi le représentant de assistance internationale sur EXCOM, Executive Committee de la PACE, et je réside sur le même territoire de PAM. Ma première affectation était au Ghana, à Accra, avec ma femme et ma jeune fille 2013 et 2016. J'étais subséquemment affecté avec la famille à Ramallah, Cisjordanie, bande de Gaza, en 2019-22. Donc, je peux parler en matière de hardship, expérience de famille. Puis aussi, j'ai loué ma résidence les deux fois, donc j'ai beaucoup des opinions là. What would I suggest? Totally different from Jennifer and Peter. So this is a real great diversity, I hope, just, where we see things, even within our small group of three. The first thing is that I wish I'd known that you don't know what you don't know, but there are other CBS who do. So definitely use your networks, find your godmother, your godfather, because people are cheering for you and they want to see you succeed. I also didn't know what I was entitled to. So when we talk about foreign service directives, if you're brand new, if you're junior, if you come from the NGO world, this all seems really exciting and generous. But you start to understand that there's also a standard for Government of Canada. And so you are entitled to your entitlements, but don't become entitled as well. Try to stay grounded there. I would say for networking, make friends with the IT professional, with the admin assistant to the HOM, with the mission consular officer, or the DMCO, if they're dealing with your property. So, get to know them, have some discretion, especially because eventually you'll be asking for favors from them. But they're really important people, and they're also human beings. The LES local staff know the terrain incredibly well. They may have very long history, great experience. They may have a connection to Canada. We had in Ramallah 2 who were Canadian citizens. And so how they saw themselves was totally different. But they were all excellent sources of information and advice and great interlocutors. The first 100 days goes really quickly. There's administrivia, there's so many people to meet, places, and suddenly it's New Year's. So try and it's a marathon, but it's also a sprint at the same time. So, try and be grounded if you can. And on that, my final main thing would be, the importance of wellness. There's your mental wellness, there's your spiritual wellness. You're working and living in a fishbowl with a very small number of people who get to know you incredibly well, and you rely on your partner if you have one, and even your children. So it's a very unusual experience in that sense. And I'll also say for colleagues, it cuts both ways. Being in a small space can be very challenging for work relations, but there's also great moments of generosity. When my partner was hospitalized for several days, my manager offered to just come around our house in the evening and watch my child so I could go visit her while he marked stuff and looked at memos. And that was something that I wouldn't expect from my manager in Ottawa necessarily. And then making yourself feel at home for a multi-year stay, bringing things in your shipment, determining what you want to keep in storage. One example is a very experienced colleague. When they arrived, the first thing they did was they asked for permission to paint an accent wall in their residence. And for us, we had spent our first year with these blank white walls because we were too scared to nail something to them. But it was our home for 3 years. And so it's quite important because this will mark you as an experience, for good or for bad. You bring the art home with you like I have. You may bring home a partner, new children, and you could be living through history. People having their first posting during COVID or during a major conflict gives them a totally different perspective. Finally, what my colleagues wish they had known is that housing prices and interest rates are not fixed. So hindsight is 2020. You do what you can, but that was one thing that was, quite marking for me in hindsight as well. That's all.
Thanks, Michael. I mean, these are very great tips, and I think back, like we did not have the ability, when I was going on my first long posting in 1996 to have this kind of a gathering, right? It was not so easy to get people together. So, I mean, I picked up a lot of wisdom from, talking to people in the cafeteria and at work, but I wish, we'd had access to some of these things. And I agree with all the points that that people have made. I mean, I would say, in terms of the FSDs and not missing out on things, but also not getting, not starting to get too entitled about things. I mean, remember that, just because things are covered with on the FSDs does not mean that, you cannot do things for yourself that to make yourself comfortable. And even sometimes you might even want to spend a little bit of, your extra allowance money on, you don't like the blender that's in the SQ, you want to get another one. I mean, it's not the end of the world to do that, and it can make a huge difference to your comfort level. So yeah, know yourself and know what's going to make you happy. And the more you can make your home somewhere that you're really happy to be in, the better you'll be, because it is stressful. I mean, I remember going on my first posting and we had, different sessions on culture shock and so on. And I remember getting there and thinking, what are these people talking about? It's all wonderful. And then like 3 months to the day, standing in line at the bank and looking at this room full of, completely innocent people who were not bothering me and thinking, I hate everyone. I hate everyone in this city. I hate this place. I hate the way everything is done. And then, luckily I had something paused in my brain to say, oh, is this that culture shock that they were talking about? Maybe I should go back to my notes. And I mean, another tip that I have is when you take over a job, look to see if your predecessor has left you any handover notes and read them. The number of times I've seen myself or heard from people months later, oh yeah, I found those handover notes that you left me like a year ago, and I wish I had looked at them at the time. They were really helpful. Come on, folks, like most of us will do that. And it's also okay to ask the person who's leaving to say, listen, could you map out for me? I mean, I usually do it for the people who are coming in, and because someone did it for me, map out that first 90 days. What are the important milestones, important meetings, your 3 to 5 key contacts in the local government and at other missions, that will get yourself, that will get you rolling. You don't have to know everything. I mean, my philosophy was always, I can't be an expert on everything, because when I was first posted to Nairobi, we covered 5 or 6 countries. And I looked at that and I thought, okay, I'm not going to be able to be an expert on all of this, but I thought I can be an expert on the experts. And so that was how I went about my network. Was I tried to meet all of the other people in Nairobi who were covering all the other parts of my territory, and get a good relationship going with them. So then it was a Rolodex, literally, like, that I could, hey, headquarters has a question about Uganda economic something or other. Oh, there's someone at the US Embassy who does only that. And luckily I met with them. And go to those networking events. They can be painful, but you can take 10 business cards, walk in. When you've given them out, you've been seen by the host and you've shaken everybody's hand and you've given out your 10 cards and met your 10 people, you can go. It doesn't have to be a big drama, but you will get useful information and useful support from those things. And everyone's doing the same, right? Everybody has to go to them. And so, I would say make the best of them. I'm I'm yakking because I'm not seeing any questions coming in yet on the Q&A button. So I encourage people who are out there to send us some questions. Maybe I'll go backwards, Peter, Mike, and then Jennifer, and ask you guys if there's anything hot pursuit you have from anything anybody else said anything you might want to add to what you said before.
Not so much directly related, just something else that I've thought of. So there's some new complexities for being posted that I think might catch people off, and it's caught me off. One of this is just something as simple as second factor authentication. So if almost everything now is starting to require like an SMS or an email. And so if you have everything going to your Canadian phone and your plan is not to use that Canadian phone when you're abroad, you might find yourself locked out of some accounts, particularly if you don't use them all that often. So it's something to give a bit of thought to, because you'll probably need to, if you want to, for example, add a different cell phone to a bank account, do that while you're in Canada, and you can still actually access second factor authentication. Luckily, the last time I was traveling, my spouse was still in Canada, so not being able to access my bank and Amazon and a bunch of other things was more of a nuisance than otherwise. The second thing I would say is VPNs. So in some countries, you won't be able to get a VPN when you're there, but if you have one pre-set up, you'll be able to access it. So when I was in Nigeria, for example, the government banned Twitter for various reasons, but I was still able to access, which was important just for some reporting we were doing. And so if you wait till, again, afterwards on IT things, it's nice to think about those. And those are both things that people told me, just like I think Micah just said, talking to colleagues about things that, either they'd learned the hard way or they'd learned from someone else. So I will pause there.
Thanks. That just made me think of something too that I learned inadvertently when I first started, and has worked out well for me, is, I mean, I'm not telling anybody to lie to your bank or your financial institution, but your permanent job is Foreign Service Officer, Government of Canada. You're a rotational employee, and your permanent headquarters is, wherever your headquarters is. So you have to change your title when you go out on a posting to political counselor, Ramallah, or wherever. You remain Foreign Service Officer. And that, if you keep that going, that saves you a lot of problems. I mean, I know sometimes people maybe might want to change things to make it clear, maybe that they have more income, during during a posting or something. I mean, that's your individual decision, but if you keep that Foreign Service Officer, that position, then you're not lying to anyone. That's the truth. And that will cut down on a lot of things. Mike, go ahead. I see you've got a couple questions coming in, so I'll look at them, and I'll bring them up to you guys after you and Jennifer finish this round.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Very hot pursuit. More tools, more complexity, which is a blessing and a curse. When I was a student in Ghana many, many years ago, I had to bring my wire transfer. I had a phone call once every 2 weeks. And now we're so incredibly connected, but we have things like two-factor authentication, dealing with credit card companies. So yeah, it's great, but it's more complex. I'll say that you will fail at a lot of things. And I certainly did a lot of failure in my first posting. But that's also part of the learning experience. So you won't be able to bat 1,000. And that's okay. But it is such a learning experience. My last tip here, pack up kits, ask about them, learn what they are before you go out. Because for your second posting, you might bring your steak knives with you and your butcher's knife in your luggage, because you know what you're going to get in your pack up kit and what you'll be without for 2 months. But that's the wisdom you learn.
I would say also, think about your own pack-up kit, right? Have a box or a suitcase that has those things that you really are going to have a hard time living without, and think about bringing, a sample of those. If you really want your favorite, flask coffee thing or whatever, think about taking it with you, because you don't always know what's gonna be there, and what the person putting the pack-up kit together might have had a completely different set of needs, right? 10 years before. Jennifer, go ahead.
Just to follow up on the pack-up kit, I'm quite systematic. I mean, some postings you might get an air shipment, some it just might be luggage. So if I'm able, Usually my backup kit, my things are like a really good knife because we cook a lot. My favorite pot, all of my pillows, even my duvet. Like I want my blanket because I'm really, and I have gone 4 months without these things because my shipments can take a long time sometimes, depending on where you're posting. So, yeah, anything you think is something you want for the first 3 months, you need to bring that because you never know what will happen. Um, One thing that I was thinking of finances, I hear it about credit card, the two-factor authentication drives me insane. And you do have to go in and visit the bank before you leave the country. My son ran into a problem where he couldn't access online banking while he was here for almost a year. So hugely important thing. And I don't know the people who are listening. I don't know what demographic you are. I can't see your faces, but I have found over the years, I have 3 kids. So I left with 3 kids that the youngest was 5, oldest was 13 when I left Canada. And now they're 21, 18, and 15. So I've kind of gone through young kids and teenage years, sending them off to university while on post. And I think throughout it all, what I really found was that maintaining and modeling a positive adaptability, flexibility with those kids is really important because if they pick up on your negative attitude toward a place, a people, they will take that and they will run with that. And I've seen many people that have had to leave post early because their teenagers were unhappy or something like that. So I think from the beginning, it's an adventure, treat it like it is. And, if hopefully we can be resilient in our work and also in our personal lives, but these kids that we drag around with us, they end up being really resilient. And it's really important because they can't control where they are. We drag them around. We don't give them a choice quite often. They have to make new friends every few years. It can be challenging for them, but I think the way we approach it can model it for them, and it just makes everything so much better. There will still be problems that come up with kids, mental health issues. These things are really important and might need some extra thought. But in general, I would say modeling positive attitude and resiliency is really, really important. And one other thing I was thinking of when someone mentioned networking, going to the meetings, some of us are more inclined to that than others. I love people, so I find it very easy to go out and meet strangers and start up conversations. That might not be the case for everyone, but being authentic, I think, is the key. If you're forcing things, people can smell that. So just being as authentic as possible. Everyone is human, no matter who it is that you're speaking to. There's always some connection that can be found. And I think keeping your interactions, whether it's with local contacts, with your like-mindeds, or even within your teams at your embassies, being real with people and being authentically interested in them to some degree is really helpful in establishing meaningful relationships and contacts.
Thank you. Thanks. So we've got some questions on the Q&A. So maybe I'll go through go to the first one, and I'll start with Mike. Mike, someone is just asking for more tips for the prep process that we're in right now, like the whole, I guess, preparation to move. One thing I would say, we did a session, PAFSO breakfast a couple weeks ago with Edith from Haven Maven. And she gave a lot of tips on getting ready to move. So I would suggest watching that. That video will probably give you a few things. But Mike, do you have any additional tips? Oh, and the other thing I would suggest is think about using some of your incidental money. If you've got stuff that you don't want, don't stick it in storage. There are companies like 1-800-JUST-JUNK and places like that where you can call them, and for a couple $100, someone will come to your house. They'll load it all onto a big truck. They take it to their warehouse. They have recycling and donation facilities. You can investigate the different companies for what they offer, and you can get rid of a lot of stuff, because it is not fun on the other end to come back to a pile of crap that you have left in storage, and now have to deal with 4 years later. Ask me how I know. So there. Sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to poach your time, but do you have any additional tips?
You scooped my answer, which was the Haven Maven session. And the PAFSO channel on YouTube is a wonderful repository of information like this. I mean, there's so much that happens. There's so much preparation. You can make it as complex or as simple as you like. I find at the end of the day, you're still going to be 48 hours before Wheels Up leaving, and you're going to be running around looking for the right kind of battery for a headlamp that you got from Mountain Equipment Company or something of that nature. But what I found was, I mean, we did all of this preparation. We had our Excel spreadsheet with our inventory, which is really fascinating. You literally list everything that you own and you assess a value to it. And then we put a bunch of stuff in storage, and then we came back in 3 years and realized, why did we even store this? It wasn't necessary. It was like the Marie Kondo, this doesn't spark joy to us here and it doesn't abroad. But that was something we learned on the back end. So it doesn't hurt to store stuff, but what I found was, just as a few people noted, like, find what you need. If it's that duvet, if it's that, extra cycle, if it's that, for me, it would be my record player. I really regret that I didn't bring my record player with me and all my records. My wife did not share the same feeling. But I realized when I saw it, like, oh, I would feel better. I would have felt better, and I had the resources, so I should have. Versus, the many, many boxes of Cheerios I brought, which was maybe too many Cheerios, but not enough peanut butter. Again, depends on your circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, when you're packing up either for storage or for shipping, watch what they're labeling things and put things together. And if the label's not going to tell you where a key item is, go right on the box and or mark it somehow so you'll be able to find those really important things. Because yeah, when they unload things, sometimes they pile everything in your, especially coming home, your now smaller apartment or whatever, and you have to like climb over a whole bunch of boxes to get to them. So that will save you a lot of angst at the other end. Okay, thanks, Mike. Jennifer, do you have anything to add to that? Any additional tips for the moving process and what everybody's doing right now?
It's something that you may do many times, so you'll get lots of experience at it. And like everyone else, talking about the things that we've accumulated and what to do with that when you're moving from place to place. Do you really need to put that all in storage? I find that having moved every few years, I have become less attached to a massive amount of things. There are things that I want to keep. There's things I like. And at every place I am collecting things. So yeah, as you continue to move around, you might be collecting local art, local furniture even. But I think compared to what I see to some of my family in Canada, I'm definitely less attached to things, especially being in a place where there is so much need. I actually brought quite a bit of donation with me to this country because in Japan, you can't really donate very easily. And it gives me even more incentive to get rid of as many things as possible before packing up, because other people in the world have so much need. And when it's in your face, like, you just want to give as much as possible. Yeah, so I did have that thought just about being less attached to things as we move from place to place. And but if there's anything else other than the move that is part of the preparation, when there's some things that can be done in advance, like that inventory, and you don't have to itemize every book or CD if you have CDs still, because you might just use Spotify, but you don't have to itemize everything. You can say, like, if you like records, I have 300 records, give it a dollar value. Do not stress over it. You don't have to spend forever on it. I like photographs. But what can get done will get done. And eventually you're going to get on that plane and you're going to be taking off regardless. And so Making sure that in that last week you have time with friends and family, I think, is a really important space to protect. Um, Having been out for a while, you will miss things, family things, and it's a great job. Everyone thinks that everyone's envious if I post photos of my travels and where I'm working and what I'm doing, but on the other side, we're not present for our aging parents, or I'm not there when there's a funeral of an aunt. Um, Thanksgiving, never been to Thanksgiving in 10 years with family, or even Christmas because travel is unpredictable in the winter, so we haven't done that either. So there's a lot of family disconnection that can happen. And depending on your own family unit, whether they're willing to travel to you, it doesn't have to be that bad. But I'd say everybody who leads this type of life has experienced it in some way, kind of becoming the other in the family, the bigger family. Maybe we don't quite fit in the way we used to. You can't talk about your postings with your family at detail because they really, they don't care that much, really. They'll ask how you're doing and what you're up to, but you can't really go into detail because they can't really relate to everything. Maybe you have some family that can, but I think that's something to be aware of, to be prepared for, and to make sacrifices if necessary to keep that family connection going year on year, if it means you spend, all your holidays in Canada visiting the family, or whatever it means to try to keep those connections. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Thanks, Jennifer. Peter, can I ask you, I've just got an eye on the time. So can I ask you if you have anything to add that we haven't sort of already?
Sure. Well, really quickly, Excel definitely your friend. Sometimes there are apps for things like inventory, but you have to worry about whether the app will be supported the next time you need it. For pack up, I think it's always a good idea to have two people there. And if you have kids, find somewhere else for them to be. I was in the United Arab Emirates. I had carefully packed winter clothing for Canada, put it in a locked cabinet. It's plus 30 most of the time, or warmer the whole time I was there. After the movers had come and gone, I opened up the cabinet to find all my winter gear gone and went back to Canada in a golf shirt and minus 30 or something. So you'd be surprised if you don't have a lot of people to supervise pack up. I've heard of people having their garbage packed and coming out 3 months later on the other end. So you really want to have a couple people there, because it seems like it's a lot easier, but when there's 4 or 5 people packing stuff, it's easy to have stuff go to storage that was supposed to go with you and that sort of thing. And the only other thing I would offer is, have a garage sale if you can. And last bit is driver's license. Some people get caught out on not being able to have a valid driver's license. So I think if you're based in Ontario, they used to have something where they would allow you one extension while you were abroad, but that wasn't something that was available if you were in other provinces. I'm not sure whether that's changed. Even then, I ended up having to exchange my Canadian license for an Austrian one. Luckily, that was a possibility, or I wouldn't have been able to drive for the last few months that I was in that posting. So if you're able to go and renew your driver's license early, that might cover a whole posting at the cost of a little bit of money. So I will stop there.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. Next one is a little changing gears a little bit. What do you recommend for a racialized or Indigenous 2S LGBTQI plus person going to a post where you don't know if your CBS and LES colleagues will embrace you as you are? How do you navigate facing discrimination at post from fellow CBS? And note, this is a generalized question from multiple sources based on experiences of microaggressions and discriminations from CBS who have been posted already. I mean, one thing I would say, just to abuse the position of the chair, is, workplace abroad is still the workplace. It's a Canadian workplace. All of the collective agreement and Canadian Labor Code, all those protections apply. So, if you are experiencing discrimination and harassment at post, absolutely, deal with it the same way that you would in Canada. There's no free pass for being out on post on any of this, and PAFSO is there for you. We provide labor relations advice, and you can always talk to us, even informally, about what the different options are. Our team, Bertrand Mir and his team, they see a lot. They can help guide you, but people should not be taking things like that because they're on post. And sometimes you'll get pressure from people, oh, we're on mission, you can't expect the same standards of behavior. Oh, yes, you can. Oh, yes, you can. And managers are still obligated to provide that safe and harassment-free workplace for people, no matter where they are. So I'll leave my point there, but maybe I will go to Jennifer to ask if you have anything else to add to that.
I agree completely. Within the workplace, I think you can vocalize if there's anything going on, and whether it's with the supervisor or communicate that somehow, because our workplaces should be respectful of all. And sometimes when we're working in different countries and environments, though, it can be pretty I understand it can be really nerve-wracking because you don't know what to expect sometimes. And I've seen successes and maybe trouble a little bit, but I would say even places where it might not be common, like for example, I'm in Zimbabwe, and it is not common to have, let's say, gay couples exhibiting or even being public in any way, because there is quite a bit of discrimination in Zimbabwe. And yet I have friends who are diplomats who are men, gay couples, and they enjoy an amazing life here. They have great friends, we travel, and there is no way that they are smaller or change their habits or way of life, and they are accepted. So maybe it's because of who they are, and they feel like they're at a point in their life they can do that. They are married. Maybe it's harder for a single person in certain countries or posts or environments. So yeah, I think it is a consideration, and I know and I acknowledge that my colleagues in Zimbabwe, I'll speak. My colleagues or other diplomats who are of color, particularly Black, because they look more like maybe they should fit into the local cultural context, have a much different experience. There are a lot of assumptions being made, and I'm sure in other places of the world it's the same phenomenon can happen. So my experience, I think, is quite different than another person's. Speaking on maybe being a woman, I think recently I shared an experience where I was greeting some official visitors at the airport. So the immigration official was with us at the airport, the head, and he was introducing or speaking, and he was suggesting that I was going to make the traditional meal for our official visitors. My sister will be doing this for you guys. And rather than and I have my way of handling these things, and I just kind of, cajoled him a little. I'm like, they're gonna be waiting forever for that because I'm not the one who does the cooking, it's my husband. So maybe you should ask him. But just to reset expectations. So usually there's a way to do that, to lighten the mood, to educate at the same time, to make sure that they understand maybe where some boundaries were. Yeah, so I think as diplomats, maybe we find ways to be diplomatic about it in a professional context. Yeah, perhaps my colleagues have other experiences they may be able to share.
Thanks, Jennifer. Mike, I'll go to you next.
Not incredibly qualified to answer. What I'm very impressed, though, particularly within the department, is how many networks there are of people who have experiences, people who want to share, and people who want to support, which I think is a huge asset in the time that we're in. I do find that, if one can fill the space with their identity, do it, because you'll have support from people at the mission as well. I was in a very homogenous mission amongst our CBS cohort, and we actually had to take a lot of effort to get diversity and to attract the right people and retain the right people who didn't, look or think like me. And that was a big plus for us, but it took a lot of effort. But there was a lot of willingness and goodwill there. In Accra, for racialized Canadians, the CBS had the opportunity to access different networks, walk through certain barriers because they weren't the Canadian they had in mind. So that's an interesting way where people can really turn things on their head and show that diversity of Canada. In a place like for Ramallah, which was Jerusalem, living in Jerusalem, incredibly intersectional. So it really depends on who you are, how you react. So this is very like context specific on where you're going. But if you talk to people, people will give advice and they will support you and they will help you find solutions. And we need that diversity of Canada at our missions. So please go for it.
Thanks, Mike. Peter, how about you?
Tough question for me to answer. I'm very fortunate that I've almost never experienced discrimination. My wife's family's from India, and when we were in Austria, which is a delightful country and it is more advanced than Canada in many ways, brilliant public transportation, for example, she experienced, while I wasn't around, some shocking abuse, including being screamed at by a right-wing politician. And I guess the only thing I could take away from her experience was stand up for yourself and think about what you might say ahead of time. I think what really hurts for people is if you're kind of typical Canadian and you're just sort of shocked and you're really polite and you don't say anything, a lot of the time you think later, I wish I would. So the second or third time she had something like that, she stood up for herself and didn't make what was said to her any better, but she didn't feel like she'd been bullied and not kind of given back. And so that isn't super helpful because it wasn't really talking about CBS. I guess my second point is, in my experience, as much as there's issues within Canada, in some other countries, you're going to find there's even more. I was really, really surprised by Austria, where there was both a maybe animosity towards Roma or Gypsy, as they would term them, or issues around immigration that were, I think, significantly more challenging than Canada at the time. I just had no idea because I kind of assumed, based on discussions with like-minded from European countries, that they were at a similar place as Canada or better, and found out that at least in the at that time and place, that wasn't the case. So
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, I'm not part of that community, but I am single and have always gone on all my postings single. And sometimes in some places people assume, oh well, you're not married, so you must be you must be gay, you must be there. They have all kinds of ideas about single women, especially as you get older, going out on posting. And I think the point that Mike made as well about being, the idea that like a diplomat's job is not just it's not just to tell the home country about what's going on in the place you're posted. It's also to represent the society that you come from. And, in Afghanistan, even, like, I had many discussions with people where they were like, what are you doing? How can your male relatives be letting you go on this posting? And I said, well, that's not how it works in my country. I decided for myself that I wanted to do this work. And, they were surprisingly good and open discussions. And I would like to think that we can advance understanding of a whole bunch of things sometimes with those conversations. That's the positive one. I mean, the negative interactions, I think we've covered, but I just want to reiterate that there is support for you if you are facing those kinds of things. I mean, through both PAFSO and also through IRCC and GAC, and managers and your colleagues do have obligations to you in that regard. So switching gears, we have a question en français. Et quelqu'un dit, j'aimerais savoir si vous avez des traditions quand vous débutez à une nouvelle affectation. Traditions. Any traditions? Maybe Peter, I'll start with you. I'm going
another
backwards
tough
again
one because
on my circle.
several of my assignments and TDs have been unaccompanied. So it was more things I did before posting, but typically it was a place, or maybe more than one place in Canada, that we wanted to visit as a family. That wasn't about seeing family, but for us, from Alberta, we try to go to the Rocky Mountains once, or somewhere out in the wilderness, because it's not necessarily an experience that in some heavily urban settings you could have. So it was the pre-posting, have a little time for us in the wilderness. That was the key one.
Thank you. Mike, how about you?
Jennifer a noté le phénomène d'action de grâce toujours à l'étranger. Donc, ça devient une tradition soi-même. Pour moi, je dirais que c'est important de prendre des vacances très bientôt dans l'affectation. Idéalement, action de grâce ou Noël, pour quitter le SQ, de résidence, mais après avoir eu une aventure, rentrer chez soi, qui est ça c'est un changement de paradigme, une façon de penser. Ma première affectation, j'avais besoin de décaler notre vacances internationales de Noël jusqu'au Pâques. Et après 8, 9 mois, j'étais trop stressé et j'avais besoin de cette vacances dans une manière que j'avais aucune idée à l'époque. Mais pour le deuxième, on a ciblé, OK, on va prendre une tour autobus de la Jordanie pour une fin de semaine incroyable. Et après une fin de semaine très intensive, oh mon Dieu, on est chez nous. Ah, la douche. Ah, mon lit. Correct. Donc, ça devient une tradition idéalement pour les gens.
Oui, la première fois on est rentré chez soi et on a toutes les choses, c'est un très bon moment dans une affectation. Jennifer, how about you? Any traditions?
Malheureusement, j'ai pas beaucoup de traditions quand j'arrive à une affectation, mais j'aime l'idée de Mike de prendre une vacance tôt dans l'affectation. C'est une bonne idée de faire ça. Mais aussi, non, j'ai pas beaucoup. L'autre chose. OK, nous avons déjà mentionné l'action de grâce, mais je pense, dans chaque de mes affectations, nous avons juste invité les autres Canadiens ou les autres diplomates qui n'ont pas de famille, qui sont dans le pays tout seuls ou juste des amis qu'on a rencontrés dans les derniers 2 mois, peut-être, les premiers 2 mois de notre affectation. C'est une bonne tradition à continuer dans chaque pays, chaque année, juste de maintenir quelques traditions canadiennes, mais à l'étranger avec des amis. Oui,
Merci
c'est
beaucoup.
quelque chose.
Folks, we're coming up on 5 to 10. I mean, I can stay a little bit longer if you can, but I understand that, some of our panelists and some of the other people might have to go. So there's a very good question on here about the key questions you would like to ask your predecessor at post. I propose to save that one till last because I think that would be a very good note to end on. And then in the meantime, maybe we could do a quick lightning round about some of the more specific ones. Someone is asking, do any of you have experience with FSD 16, particularly reimbursement of real estate agent fees? Thinking of selling a home, purchasing an apartment close to SQ, but it might be preferential to wait until the first posting confirmation. So one thing you should be aware of with that is that if you do not buy or sell in conjunction with a PCF, your that allowance is taxable. So you'll lose, depending on your tax level, 30 to 50% of it in tax. And also, if you're planning to do that, don't do it, but don't wait, make sure you've got your PCF before you buy or sell, because you could find yourself on the hook if you do things without your PCF. Anybody, any wisdom to add for that? And also think about where you are in the real estate market, right? If this is your first place and you're expecting to buy and sell 2 or 3 times, you might want to save your one shot at real estate fees till you've got a bigger place, right? Although I was always like, I need the money now. So, you know your own financial situation. But Jennifer, do you have anything quickly to add on the idea of FSD 16?
Not too much. I sold my house before I even got a PCF, so I'm out of that game completely. But we kept a cabin, so that's our deal. We keep our cabin, we go back to the cabin, but I don't have a house anymore. I would just say with FSDs, make sure the advisor gives you everything, because they will keep you to the very letter of the law, even if it's not in the NJC FSD directive specifically. If it's in their Q&A or any other process they've decided is the norm, they will hold you to that. So, and it can change. So some people here may have had experience a couple of years ago. I would just say, get it in writing, exactly everything currently right now, because FSDs are kind of the bane of my existence, and I'm not terribly positive about it right now. So I'm probably not a good person to ask about anything FSD related.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut. Yeah, just generally, look at the text of the FSDs. If they're saying things that are not in there, feel free to reach out to the PAFSO office and we'll talk to you, because they do not get to make up stuff as they go along that is outside the text of the FSDs. I know they get a lot of people with that, and we will push back on those things. Mike, anything on the issue specifically of real estate buying and selling?
Nothing useful, though I would say for FSDs, as a side note, getting to know your FSD advisor, that's a whole game of diplomacy in itself. But if you can make it work for you, it's nicer to be the good cop than the thousands of bad cops who are demanding things really angrily. So good luck. But yes, they will hold you to things based on their interpretation at the time. And it will guide your life in ways that you have no idea. But that's part of the game.
Yeah, no, for sure. Peter, how about you?
Two observations. So I agree with everything that's been said. You can sell houses on your own. I think we've sold 6 houses, 4 on our own. It's a bit more work, but then you save the real estate fees, still deal with a lawyer. And the second piece, I think, is if you ever have a move within Canada, it's covered by a different set of rules. And I actually found those much harder to navigate than FSDs. So that if it really takes some time to unpack. I think I read them 4 or 5 times and still couldn't follow them. So maybe it was a bad week or something, but there's one set of rules for moving outside of Canada. There's another for moving within Canada.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, so Marty's pointed out to me, if we run out of time, we're going to take the questions that have been asked and we'll just add them to tomorrow's session. So if we don't get to you and you're on here, please join us tomorrow. Marty, can you remind us what time is tomorrow's session? Again, I know I have it in my calendar, but
It is the same time of 9 a.m. Ottawa time.
Okay. So you have a second kick at the can with some different panelists. But we have another one. Somebody's asking about packing. More about how you decide what to bring, what's too little, what's too much, is less better to bring more for good measure. What does generally look like? I mean, I would just jump in and say it really depends where you're going, and also on what your SQ is like and what you expect, to happen while you're there. Like if you have a 3-bedroom SQ and you're a single person and you only expect to ever have one visitor at a time, you might want to like sort of dedicate that 3rd bedroom to storage and bring all your favorite stuff. But if you're going to have a lot of visitors, or your SQ, ask what your SQ is like and whether it has space. I mean, I'm still embarrassed about the amount of toilet paper I took with me to Sarajevo, not recognizing that they had a Costco equivalent called Macro that was had all kinds of great stuff. And like it was the locally engaged staff who were helping me out thought that was pretty funny that there was toilet paper in my shipment. But I was operating on old advice from from during the war, and when you really couldn't get stuff. And it's not like you don't use stuff, so it didn't hurt anything except my pride maybe. But Peter, I'll ask you to go first, because I
Sure, really quickly.
Last time.
Money, meds, electronics, kids stuff, documents.
Yes. Those are the key things. Okay, Mike, how about you?
You said it so succinctly. It's those things that you're going to need, or the things you can't live without, or you should not be parted with. That goes with you in the suitcase. If it's something you can do a little bit longer, you put it in the air shipment. If you're worried about it getting destroyed or damaged, don't put it in the sea shipment because it's going to be out there for maybe 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's all posting specific, as you noted. For Ghana, we brought everything, which worked out for us. For Jerusalem, Ramallah, you can find just about everything. Israel has IKEA, so we were a little more strategic about it. Although I will say that in COVID, when I had a closet full of toilet paper, I felt like the king of the world for a period. And it was like a liquid currency I could trade on other things.
On other
I
things.
would say pack maple syrup if you can, if they'll allow
Yes.
you to, because
Little
that
gifts
always
and things
works.
like that are worth taking. Like, even if you spend a little bit of your own money, you know, to go to the Snow Goose or, you know, or the art gallery gift shop and buy a few little small things to give to contacts, it's worth it. But also, you know, having stuff in your shipment means you don't have the hassle of shopping for things, right? Like, you know, even in Poland, like everything was there. They have 2 IKEAs. They had 2 IKEAs at the time in Warsaw, like, but it was still sometimes a bit of a challenge just, you know, navigating everything. And I was not sorry to have stuff in hand in my SQ, so I didn't have to worry about some things. Jennifer, anything? Oh,
Can
sorry.
sorry, this is a really weird phenomenon, but you may find that people ask you who are already at post to ship things for them, which is entirely at your discretion. But I shipped my boss's new tires, which sounds very coercive, but I also got someone to ship me tires 2 years later. So
Yeah. I mean, that's a tip for if you're comfortable with it, for kind of establishing yourself, making nice with the people you're going to be working with, is to send an email, you know, before you do your pack up and say, is there anything anybody would like me to bring? But be careful. I mean, we have had people be asked to bring inappropriate things, and you know, you're still responsible for what goes in your shipment. I would say do not agree to ship anything, no matter who they are, in a sealed box that you're not allowed to open, you know. You do need to, you know, watch out for yourself, just like you normally would. But you know, especially people with kids, right? They often appreciate, you know, extra craft dinner or whatever in the Costco shipment, and that's, you know, that's generally not too hard to do. Um, Sorry, did we lose Jennifer? Did you have a chance to answer this one? Sorry, my
I don't,
my
and I
left
won't say
ear, I
too
think.
much, other than maximizing each level. So luggage, if you can manage, maximize that. Air shipment, maximize whatever kilos they're going to allow you. And then of course the sea shipment is left, you know, you don't have to maximize that necessarily, but just taking full advantage of what is offered to have things at your location as quickly as possible. Mentioning toilet paper, we've been here for 3 years now, and I found one roll of like awesome Costco toilet paper, and I hid it from everyone else, and I only kept it for myself because it was like primo toilet paper. I never regret bringing good toilet paper with me to post ever.
So
And one thing that hasn't been mentioned, but especially if you're in a representational role, or even if you don't know whether you will be, good idea to bring, think national days. You're going to want a red, especially on our side, like a red dress. You're going to want red and white. You're going to be wearing that at other national days, perhaps, and even hosting your own. So if you don't have that in a wardrobe, a really important thing to consider before going out to post, making sure you have something that makes you look like Canada or a flag.
perfect. Thank you. Next question. Somebody is asking, what is the typical expectation for when to start work once you've arrived at post? Thinking of a chaotic arrival, trying to settle kids into school and daycare. Again, I mean, I would say that that is one of those things that really depends on your family situation, on your mission. I always like to arrive on like a Wednesday and then have a day to kind of, you know, get over jet lag. Then on Friday, go into the office and find my way, say hi to everyone, you know, show my face, and then start work on Monday after you've had a weekend to look around and feel like you've acclimatized. But you know, you're going to need to talk to your manager, figure out what's happening. If you've got kids and things, that adds, you know, another dimension. But I will maybe Mike, do you have wisdom on that? You've got kids, right? So you could.
Yes, and the school schedule definitely drove a lot of our thinking and planning. And when we arrived, particularly as children get older and school becomes more consequential. Um, One thing I'd just say, because we haven't mentioned it, but the Foreign Service Facebook group, which is not a PAFSO group, but is where foreign service officers go to crowdsource things. You can ask a lot of questions. This question was just asked, I think, in the last week. But yes, it's certainly something that, every mission's a bit different. It's one of those things where like you don't just have a bank in Phoenix where it's like, here's my 5 days or here's my 4 days. So I've heard different interpretations. So yeah, it's very case by case and manager by manager, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I mean, I would feel out your manager beforehand, and ask, but also don't be too deferential because there are always going to be some managers who are like, "Oh my God, we're saving the world here," and you absolutely have to, you absolutely have to be in there. I would be like, "Okay, so I'm arriving late Wednesday night, so I'll come say hi Friday afternoon, and my first day will be Monday," and let them know, and don't necessarily ask them, and if they have other views, they'll tell you. But it's okay to be a bit assertive and, because everyone would much rather you arrive there refreshed and able to get started than that you're coming in, you're coming out, you're missing meetings, you're not able to function because you're exhausted because you just got off a plane. There's a
And there's
what
also the fact that your predecessor probably left 6 to 8 weeks before, and they've been kind of running on fumes. So
yeah.
they're dying to have this person come in and fill that role. But you also need to be on your own schedule. So there will always be that pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the pitch that I always make is, look, give me this little bit of time and then I won't have to be in and out once I actually start. Someone has asked if any of this advice, do you guys have anything specific on people heading to high hardship posts and conflict zones? Does that change, or is there anything to add to any of the advice that you've given? Jennifer, I'll start with you because you're currently in a high hardship posting, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Hardship can be determined by different things. It could be security, it could be availability of goods, it could be a lot of different things that would make a place hardship. Here, for example, no, you can't buy a lot of things. So that shipment can actually be quite critical, except when you live in a place where a lot of things are not sold locally. People develop other ways. You find out which the best runners are coming in from South Africa, how to order things online and get someone to bring it on a plane. So there's always workarounds, but before you figure out all of that, I think being very thoughtful about your shipment is very, very important. And I personally, I think I've done an A level and I've done level 4. And my family operates really well in a level 4. We love it. That type of stress, fine with us. Working 14-hour days, not so fine after years of doing that. And just that's not fun. So, there's always trade-offs. And I would say that you might already know, maybe you don't know yet, what yourself and your family kind of enjoy most. But hardship places do come with some challenges, but having the right mindset, understanding FSDs will cover some of those issues. Internet here is like $500 Canadian a month. That really sucks, but there's a workaround and it's fine. And yeah, just kind of letting that go. But there's beautiful things about hardship places. I find those places to be absolutely wonderful and beautiful in so many ways. So I am a fan of hardship.
Yeah, me too. There's more of a community in those places often, right? We used to have more people coming home early from postings in the States. And in, for example, the Nordic countries, like, you know, the A post, because there's an assumption, I think, that you're going to be able to navigate everything yourself. And so, you know, sometimes there isn't that community that kind of reaches out to people, make sure they know where to get their groceries, you know, all of that kind of thing. And it can be quite lonely. I mean, whereas a hardship post, you know, you're kind of more aware that you need to band together a little bit more, and it comes more naturally. Mike, do you have anything to add?
I'd suggest that whatever decisions you make, they should follow your values and what's important to you. So as you said, hardship is actually kind of fun. And some people call Ottawa the hardship 6 posting, based on, you know, their experiences abroad. So what's important to you, you should go with. But then be flexible once you arrive, because what you thought you might have access to might not be there, or what you thought was important may not actually turn out that way. In Ramallah was a case where, you know, security was the challenge, but goods, travel, other things, medical access was very easy. Accra was totally different. So it'll, again, depend on your posting. And you'll figure out what your supply lines are. Like, you'll bring stuff over, but you'll also know what, if there's a commissary, if there's the diplomatic like IDS duty-free orders, or just how many people come, you know, on a monthly basis to your mission, and, you know, can they throw an extra jar of peanut butter in?
Exactly.
You get resourceful.
Exactly. Yep. No, thank you very much. So last question, and then we'll go to our lightning, or to our 3 questions to ask your predecessor. Someone is asking, what's the relationship between IRCC and GAC FSOs on post? For me, that's really, again, dependent on the mission. Like in, you know, small hardship places, everyone is, you know, working together on, you know, your emergency response team and so on. There's a lot of back and forth between people. In Warsaw, there was a big immigration section, but they did not really, there was no visa requirement for Poles. So they were working on all kinds of other stuff that didn't really directly affect the mission. And so we made a point of integrating everybody, like with all of our social events and mission stuff, but it was less, you know, it was less obvious in the kind of day-to-day work. We didn't have that much to do with each other. But Jennifer, how about you? What's your experience been?
Some of my favorite people have been my IRCC colleagues. To me, we all work together and we're a team. That was my silent point number 5 that I didn't mention at the outset. That teamwork, the notion of a team is really important when you're at post, whether it's the team you supervise, your CBS, your family communities, CBS independence. But to me, there's no difference really between my IRCC colleagues and my GAC colleagues. And socially, we can have a great time just as well as anyone else. So I think that at post, you don't see those divisions. Maybe it depends on the post. Maybe it depends on the people. But I have had great opportunities to have really good friends and close friends in the IRCC program. So I think it's a great opportunity to get to know different people in other programs at post.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Mike, how about you?
For Accra, I found that IRCC, it was separated. Like, I literally never went in. It was kind of like a closed box. And in the case of Dakar, where I'm working in partnership right now, the IRC building is actually in a different building on a separate street. So there's kind of like 2 solitudes there. It's a very different pace, because what they have to do as officers is very different from what, you know, development folks or political folks have to do. But some of my best friends are IRCC folks. We made wonderful relations with people, and we're still really close with some. So definitely bridge that divide as soon as you can. It'll also help when you've got to negotiate visas, for example, for NGO partners. If you're supporting an organization and they have to go to a conference in Canada, some places like in Ghana, there's a very high bar for the immigration section. And also, everyone will ask you about visas. I still haven't figured out how to do that thing.
Yeah.
But
That's one tip I would say when you arrive in a post is talk to the head of the immigration section and agree on what your line will be when you're asked about visas, especially if you're an FPDS officer. I mean, I think IA gets that, as we all get it to a certain extent, but yeah, agree who your contact will be, whether you can give out a personal, you know, a direct email to someone that will help in your relations with IRCC colleagues for sure. And don't, in general, I would say, even if you think you know something about visas, do not get into giving advice or, speculating on things, because you can get into a lot of trouble. But, even when you come back, like even for our colleagues, like I'm political FPDS, even colleagues in the trade stream, for example, I was shocked that when I came back to Ottawa, sometimes you just don't have that much contact with each other. And at Mission, you definitely have more of a chance to get to know everyone, and there are things that will bring you together. So, it's one of the nice things about going on posting for, just in general in foreign service stuff. If it's okay with you guys, maybe I will go and I will ask you each, what your top couple of questions are to ask your predecessor. Then if you have time, I'll pause the recording and I'll stay just for in case anyone has the recording thing. And I can I can stay if nobody else can. Michael, what are the top couple of questions you consider key to ask your predecessor when you're going out on post?
Those first 100 days, what do I need to do? What do I have to do to hit the ground running? Because I may not see things like, for example, forging relationships with a host ministry, and that's something that you want to do really quickly, because it'll take time for it to bear fruit. And then the other thing is asking the same question that we're asking here. What do you wish you knew when you started? Because after 2, 3, 4 years, they will have experience. They might be grumpy, they might be resigned to things, or they might be jaded, but they might also have some really great wisdom that they can share you. And so never discount that. Even if you're going to have a different style, or you have a different personality, they're bringing something to the table. And at the end of your posting, you're going to be like them. You're just going to put all this stuff in a box, and then you may not come back to it much. And when you come home, it's kind of like you've been to Mars for 3 years. And as Jennifer said, when you leave, when you come back, you're like, oh, how was post? What is that? And you don't have a framework to talk to them.
Exactly.
And so I'm always happy to contribute, and I'm happy to, if anyone emails me after, I'm happy to rant on more, because we have this experience. We don't want you to fail. We don't want you to make the same mistakes we did, and we want you to succeed. So with your predecessor, assume that as well.
Yeah. I mean, one tip I would say is when you arrive at a post, keep notes on what your impressions are, what hits you, what you wish you'd known before you got there, the questions you asked and the answers that you got, so that when you're at the other end, right, you can remember what it was like to be that person arriving. Because depending how long you stay, sometimes people can be extended like twice, and you're by the time you're leaving, you can be you can be kind of jaded, and help yourself to remember what it was like to arrive. Jennifer, over to you. What do you think are key questions?
There's 3 things I was thinking of. One, you'll probably be supervising a team. You may have HR related questions about the team. There might be some special things you need to know about continuing certain management approaches, I guess. If there's problems or something like that that is in process. So that's important to note. Also, my predecessor here added me to useful WhatsApp chats. I think that's how a lot of missions operate now, like-minded. So we have like a diplomat management group, we have a consular group, we have, so, so that was really useful, because before I even arrived, I was tapped in if I had questions to the group. And then having a meeting with those like-minded partners really quickly, they'll become your backbone throughout the posting. And then I think one that's really important, it was my first thought, was to get the lowdown on your supervisor or ambassador, because you asked the question about how soon you have to come to work after arriving. It could be a really tricky one, because even though you may want to push back, I've had a supervisor expected you to be on the ground the next day. The next morning you're in the building, and I would brief other incoming people on where to be careful, where the minefields were, what they respected, what kind of approach they respected, how to gain their trust quickly, things like that. I think understanding or just having a little bit of information of what makes your supervisor tick and respect their employees and trust them can set you like on the right foot when you arrive and establish that relationship well going forward, because that could be your most important relationship at post.
And ideally, I mean, if you can have a conversation, phone chat or Zoom chat or whatever with the person you're replacing before you're making your arrangements, if they are that kind of person that wants you in the next day, then arrive on a Friday. Seriously, arrive on a Friday and give yourself that day or two to get over your jet lag and get yourself together. Because what I find is that those kind of supervisors are also kind of the ones who will judge you if if you show up discombobulated that next day, and that can really be setting up a bad dynamic. So you have to have your own back in those kinds of situations, I think. Yeah, no, it's important to know. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to say thank you. Marty, could you just turn off the recording? And we will just offer for